The fifth and final clue comes from the pen of a prophet called Daniel. He is somewhat different to Jesus in the sense that what he is supposed to have said goes back even further in history and is found in the Old Testament part of the Bible. The book of Daniel has quite a few prophecies about the end of the world, including the four beasts, the Ancient of Days, and in Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar's statue. In this prophecy, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, kept having dreams which disturbed and frightened him. One particular dream kept returning, and so he called his court of magicians and astrologers together and ordered them to tell him what it meant. For once they were all lost as to what to say. Nebuchadnezzar was more than slightly cross. "If you don't tell me what my dream means, I'll have you all cut into pieces and your homes bulldozed to rubble," he bellowed. The magicians knew he wasn't joking, so word soon got around that the king was in a foul mood and heads were going to roll. Literally. As soon as Daniel heard about it, he went back home and started to pray. During the night as he slept, the meaning of Nebuchadnezzar's dream was shown to Daniel by God. So next day Daniel went to the king's executioner, Arioch, and persuaded him to put away his axe and swords and take him to see the king. "You looked, O king, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver and the gold were broken to pieces at the same time and became like chaff as a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace, but the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. You, O king, are that head of gold. After you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, and it will crush and break all the others. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. Yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with the baked clay, so the people will be a mixture, and will not remain united any more than iron mixes with clay. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of the mountain, but not by human hands. A rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true, and the interpretation is trustworthy. So here we have a vision which prophesies the future over a time scale of thousands of years, from the time of Nebuchadnezzar to the future beyond the 21st century. It is generally agreed amongst Bible scholars that the four metals represent four occupying forces or governments whose armies conquered most of the Middle East at any one given time. The gold was Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom of Babylon. The silver, the Medo-Persians. The bronze, Greece. The iron, the Romans. The mix of iron and clay, the present day. These 4 kingdoms were prophesied to rule over the whole earth at different times in the future, and these 4 came and went, as the prophecy said. We are now living in the age of iron and clay, where the various nations in the world find great difficulty in getting on with each other. All these countries are also divided into many ethnic groups, which, like the iron and clay description, also don't tend to get along with other ethnic groups. We all live side by side, as the iron and clay are mixed together to form the feet, but in reality we are polarized, separated by boundaries that we impose upon ourselves and upon others. But here is a reason why I am examining this prophecy rather than any other. 5 parts of the prophecy have come true, and we are living in the 5th part. What are the odds against the 6th part not happening? The 6th part is the rock which was cut away from the mountainside without human assistance, and was obviously the birth of Jesus, which took place without human assistance. The rock striking the statue is the future return of Jesus in power and glory. The grinding to dust of the demolished remains of the statue is the disappearance of all human rule, and it being replaced by a divine kingdom. Again, I repeat the question. 5 parts of this prophecy have come true. What are the odds against the 6th part not happening? I am not a betting person, but if you were at the races and were told that one of the horses running had won in the previous 5 races, would you bet on that horse or on another one? 5 out of 5 are very high odds in favour, so we must ask the same question as we asked about what Jesus said. Would you trust the person who spoke this prophecy? If you do, then you can trust what he said when he talked about the resurrection at the end of the world. Daniel chapter 12. At that time, Michael, that is Jesus, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress, such as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then. At that time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars, for ever and ever. But you, Daniel, close up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end. I realise, of course, that this doesn't speak about the resurrection of Jesus. But what would be the point of a mass resurrection of millions at the end of the world if the person in charge of that resurrection had not been raised himself? Next we are going to change course completely and examine an historical document which was written approximately 60 years after the death and supposed resurrection of Jesus. In terms of the 1st century, 60 years is considered by most Bible scholars to be quite close to an event. In the 1st century, most people could not read or write, never mind produce a newspaper report of something that had happened the day before. Of course, there were no newspapers at the time that Jesus was supposedly raised from the dead, but this document was the first century equivalent because it was unbiased and reported what had happened. Notice that I said unbiased. The person who wrote this account had no connection with Christians, the Jews, or the Bible. We are in fact putting into practice what I said in part 1 of this video. If you want to know whether aliens exist, don't go to a conference for extraterrestrial believers and don't read the monthly bulletin of alien encounters. I am not saying don't read the Gospels, by the way, as they could very well save your life in a theological or spiritual or even eternal sense. I am just saying don't read the Gospels for evidence of the resurrection as an actual historical event, as the writers are predisposed to believe it, and the things they say will be unfairly biased in favour. Titus Flavius Josephus was a historian and writer who lived in the 1st century at the time of Jesus. He wrote quite a few historical documents, of which the one called The Antiquities of the Jews is just one. Here is a 1611 translation from a section of that document. Now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as received the truth with joy. He drew over to him both many of the Jews and many of the Gentiles. He was the Christ. And when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men amongst us, had condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at the first did not forsake him. For he appeared to them alive again the 3rd day, as the divine prophets had foretold. These and 10,000 other wonderful things concerning him. And the tribe of Christians, so named from him, are not extinct at this day. Notice what Josephus doesn't say. He doesn't say that the early Christians or disciples saw a vision. He doesn't say the Christians were trying to convince people that Jesus had risen from the dead. He doesn't say the Christians started a myth. What he does say is that Jesus appeared to the disciples as alive and well, in much the same matter-of-fact way as he would have said, and Jesus sat down and had a cup of tea. Because Josephus was not a Christian or a Bible writer, this is an important document to say the least. To give you some idea of how important it is, let me give a present-day example. If you decided to conduct a search into your ancestors and discovered, for example, that Harold, one of your great-grandparents, had been captured in World War I and led a successful escape from the prison camp a year later, would you believe it? You probably would, particularly if your own parents had told you the story, because you trust your parents. But what if you had been badly treated by your parents when you were a child, and you had no reason to believe what they said? Nobody else could confirm the story, as all your great-grandfather's contemporaries had also died. So where do you search? Well, I suggest that the records at the Ministry of Defence for 1914 to 1918 would be a good start. And if you didn't find anything there, you would have to look through every daily newspaper for the same 4 years. This would take a very long time, but you may well be rewarded, because if you happen to discover just 2 lines at the bottom of a page in mountains of newspaper reports, you would have found what you wanted. And I am fairly certain that you would believe it. Josephus was the 1st century equivalent of today's newspaper reporter. So this one line from Josephus's book is no different. You can check it out at the website.